Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Great. My name is Heather Grondin. I'm the Vice President of Communications and Stakeholder Relations for the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority, and I will be the moderator for today's meeting. I would like to welcome you to the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority's first annual public meeting. We are pleased that so many members of the public from both sides of the border are here to join us today. I would like to acknowledge a few people in the room. We have Douglas George, the Canadian Consul General from Detroit here. And we also have Raquel Castaneda Lopez, Councillor for the City of Detroit District 6 with us as well. As a Canadian Crown Corporation, the WDBA is responsible to the public. The purpose of today's annual public meeting is to share information on our operations and activities and to solicit feedback from the public. To ensure that we reach as many members of the public as possible, we are webcasting today's meeting so that those who are unable to join us today will have an opportunity to view the proceedings. Also, for those who are unable to view the webcast or join us, we will post a video of today's proceedings on our YouTube channel in about a week. Our website address is wdbridge.com, and you'll find a link to the video there. Following today's presentations, WDBA will take questions from the audience. Each of you received a question card when you registered, and I would ask that you write your question, including your name, on the card and pass them to the WDBA staff members stationed on either side of the room. WDBA also accepted questions in advance of today's meeting. We will make every effort to answer all the questions today. All questions and answers will be posted on our website in the next few days. This annual public meeting is focused on WDBA's first year of operations, 2014 to 2015. The financial statements for that fiscal year continue to be audited and are not available for this annual public meeting. The financial statements will be released later this year and posted to our website. The public will be advised of their availability.
That my first public event as the interim chair of the authority is at the corporation's first annual public meeting. I thank all of you who are here today and those who are watching online. In just a few moments, the WDBA's President and CEO, Michael Cottillo, will provide his overview of the 2014-15 fiscal year and will speak about our current priorities. But first, it is my pleasure to introduce the WDBA Board of Directors, share a bit about the WDBA, and highlight some of the key accomplishments of 2014. The Windsor-Detroit Gateway, as most of you know, is North America's busiest commercial land border crossing. This gateway supports the economies of Canada, Ontario, the United States, and Michigan. The Gordie Howe International Bridge project is the largest infrastructure project on the Canada-US border, and it is arguably one of the most important infrastructure projects in recent Canadian history. Such an important project requires a board of directors which has diverse and extensive business skills and experience, as well as community experience. The WDBA Board of Directors is responsible for overseeing the business activities and other affairs of this Crown Corporation. The board is comprised of 5 members, including myself and the President and Chief Executive Officer. I'm going to introduce each of them and ask them to stand as I introduce them so that you'll recognize them and be able to put a name to a face. Michael Cottillo, President and Chief Executive Officer. William Graham, Director. Carolyn Mulrooney Lapham, Director. Craig Ricks, Director. I want to recognize each of them, and as a citizen of this community, somebody who calls Windsor home, thank them for all they have done so far. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, for the time and guidance that they have provided. Speaking as a fellow Windsorite to all of you, I've been extraordinarily impressed by the work that this group has done. And I would be remiss if I didn't also thank my immediate predecessor, Mark McQueen, who served as chair before me. Thank you, everybody, and please be seated. This board has led us through its first days and through some very important milestones. First, The vision and dedication shown by the board is also clearly evident in the members of the International Authority. The International Authority is the joint Canada-Michigan governance entity established to oversee and approve key steps in the public-private partnership P3 procurement process. It will also monitor WDBA's compliance with the crossing agreement signed by Canada and Michigan. Although WDBA is a Canadian Crown Corporation and reports to Parliament, this project, like the bridge itself, spans 2 countries. The new bridge will support what is the largest bilateral trade relationship in the world. Allow me to take a moment to reflect on where we've been and where we are going. The Gordie Howe International Bridge project has been a large part of my career and my life, as has Sandwichtown, even prior to being appointed chair. It's also been a large part of this entire community for some time. It's a great source of pride that I can say that during my time in government, we were able to start the end-to-end border transportation solution. I had the privilege of representing you when the shovels went into the ground for construction of the Right Honourable Herb Gray Parkway, Ontario's first P3 highway project. And I can tell you, as a citizen of this community, I am looking forward to shovels going in the ground to start the actual construction of the Gordie Howe International Bridge. These projects are literally changing the landscape of our international community, and those changes are positive ones. I'm proud to say that I'm part of this historic project, and to our friends from across the river, like many Windsorites, I feel like I grew up in Detroit. I know Delray, I know the city of Detroit. My first job was as a paper boy for the Detroit Free Press from the age of about 9 through 13. WDBA is committed to ensuring that the new bridge is built on time and on budget, and throughout the process, we will continue to work closely with our partners and our communities. The U.S. Federal Highway Administration, the Michigan Department of Transportation, the Office of the Governor of Michigan, as well as the Government of Canada and our many stakeholders. That is why we are meeting with the public to ensure your voice is heard and questions are answered. One more reflection before I conclude my remarks today. There has been plenty of speculation on the costs of the bridge and what that means for Canadian taxpayers. I want to remind you that the Gordie Howe International Bridge is being delivered using a public-private partnership, or P3 model. This model allows us to transfer the majority of the risk to our private sector partner, including any cost overruns, as the P3 model includes a fixed price contract. Ultimately, once we have a successful private sector partner selected, based on the rigorous procurement process that is underway, the price they bid to design, build, finance, operate, and maintain the project components will be the cost of the project. No more, no less. Finally, my thanks and appreciation go out to all the WDBA staff for your continuing belief in the work of the organization and your dedication to the job. I look forward to meeting the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead, and to working with the members of the Board of Directors, the International Authority, and the executive team at WDBA, and with all of you from our communities as we get closer to the construction of this huge project. Together, we will build the Gordie Howe International Bridge. Together, we will improve the lives of the citizens of this community and improve the relationships not only between Canada and the United States, but also the economic relationships that are so important and vital to both of our countries and to all of our communities on the border. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. And now to turn it over to Mr. Cotillo for his remarks.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Dwight. And welcome to the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority's first annual public meeting. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and discuss the Gordie Howe International Bridge project and the progress that we at WDBA have been able to make during our first fiscal year of operation. We're here today at the Mackenzie Hall Cultural Center, a heritage building located in Sandwich in the west end of Windsor. For those of you who are joining us today by webcast, have not visited the historic community, I encourage you to do so sometime soon. I'd like to start my remarks today by speaking about the genesis of the Gordie Howe International Bridge project. Canada and the US have the largest bilateral trade relationship in the world, with a total value of $870 billion per year. And much of that trade is carried by approximately 2.5 million trucks that cross here at Windsor-Detroit. And as the chair has noted in his comments, and I think that bears repeating, the Windsor-Detroit Gateway sees over 30% of the total Canada-US trade carried by trucks. And in dollar terms, this amounts to over $100 billion per year. Due to its economic importance, this trade corridor was identified by the Government of Canada, the US government, the Government of Michigan, and Ontario to be significant to the economies of both countries. They recognize the need to provide redundancy, to provide additional capacity, to provide system connectivity, and improved border processing through the Windsor-Detroit Gateway to improve the flow of people and goods between Canada and the United States. The new Gordie Howe International Bridge addresses these needs. It will provide an efficient crossing option for both passenger and commercial traffic, as well as accommodate future traffic projections. Remember, we're building this bridge for a long time. There are 4 major components to the Gordie Howe International Bridge project. First, the bridge itself will be 6 lanes and 3 kilometers in length, with an 850-meter or half-mile long center span. Second, the Canadian port of entry will be 55 hectares or 130 acres, and will include the typical customs functions that you will see in a border, so customs functions, border processing, tolling, and maintenance facilities. When it is completed, it will be Canada's largest port of entry along the Canada-US border. Third, the US port of entry will be 60 hectares or 148 acres in size, and includes customs and border processing facilities. Fourth, there will be the interchange with Interstate 75. That's to allow easy access for traffic to and from the bridge. While it is not part of the Gordie Howe International Bridge project, it would be remiss if I did not mention that the Honorable Herb Gray Parkway, which is an integral component of the new border crossing system. Together, the parkway, the new bridge, the new I-75 interchange will provide a seamless highway-to-highway connection that will facilitate trade and travel between Canada and the United States. This exciting and historic project will be delivered by the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority. And our mandate is to oversee and manage the procurement process for the design, for the construction, the financing, the operation, and the maintenance of the Gordie Howe International Bridge through a public-private partnership. WDBA is also going to oversee and manage the construction and the operation of the new crossing. We were created in 2012, and it began operation in August of 2014. At that time, the Government of Canada also announced the names of the Board of Directors and the International Authority. Personally, I was appointed in August of 2014 as President and Chief Executive Officer of WDBA, and thus I became WDBA's first employee. My priorities back then continue to be threefold. One, to set up the corporation and build capacity, to transition certain project activities and responsibilities from the Government of Canada to WDBA, and to undertake pre-procurement activities. thus enabling WDBA to move forward towards public-private partnership, or P3, procurement for the actual project delivery. I'm pleased to report that during the 2014-15 fiscal period, we accomplished a great deal. We established a head office in downtown Windsor, and we became one of Windsor's newest employers. Staffing began, and WDBA executive team was created. And I'd like to take a moment to introduce the members of my executive team. So I would ask that if you could please stand up. Leslie Martin, Executive Vice President of Engineering and Operations. Marta Liardi Anderson, Vice President of Policy and Project Delivery. Linda Hurdle, she holds all the money. She's our Chief Financial Administrative Officer. John Nader is our General Counsel. And Heather Grondin at the back is our Vice President of Communication and Stakeholder Relations. Thank you very much. WDBA is made up of a group of dedicated employees. To date, we've hired over 40 people with engineering, technical, procurement, environmental, financial, legal, policy, communications, and other experience. I'm sure we've missed some out. Our first year of operation was busy. Our staff worked very long hours to achieve significant progress. And I'd like to thank all of our employees for their dedication, for their support, for their commitment, and for their belief in both WDBA and the Gordie Howe International Bridge project. And remiss to say, it was mentioned as a beautiful project, and it truly is a beautiful project. I'd like to take a moment to recognize our collaboration with the U.S. Federal Highway Administration, the Michigan Department of Transportation, the Office of the Governor of Michigan. We've had some representatives from those organizations with us today. WDBA works with their staff on a daily basis, and the dedication, support, commitment of these team members is parallel to that of our own WDBA staff. To fully transition responsibilities from government department, several external advisory services have been retained by WDBA. These include financial and transaction advisors, capital markets advisors, legal advisors, and a P3 fairness monitor. We have also taken advantage of public sector best practices by retaining the services of Public Services and Procurement Canada to assist with the procurement process. While operations have transitioned from the federal government department to WDBA, we work in close cooperation with Infrastructure Canada, with Transport Canada, and with Public Services and Procurement Canada, recognizing that this project is a top priority for the Government of Canada. During fiscal 14-15, WDBA began specific pre-procurement activities. You may recall in August of 2014, we started to look at design options for things like intelligent transportation systems and tolling systems for the new bridge. And the ITS will assist us with the management of traffic through technologies and will integrate the existing ITS systems, such as variable message boards, to alert traffic of traffic issues in both Ontario and Michigan. And the tolling system designs themselves will include ways to expedite toll collection on the new bridge, such as including transponders and electronic tolling. In January of 2015, following a competitive process, WDBA also awarded a contract to Parsons to provide engineering work and technical advice for the Gordie Howe International Bridge project. And under that contract, Parsons acts as our general engineering consultant, providing a range of professional services to prepare the project for the P3 procurement process. And these services are focused principally on engineering. The work includes project management, engineering studies, technical design, utility relocation, and development of the specifications for all of the components of the crossing project on both sides of the border. Also in 2014-15, the Government of Canada, the governments of Canada, the United States, and Michigan continued discussions on a number of issues. In February 2015, 2015, Canada, the United States, and Michigan concluded an arrangement concerning the U.S. port of entry. The arrangement ensures that all the elements of the project will ultimately be delivered through a public-private partnership. And with this agreement, WDBA was able to move the project forward. Although I should limit my comments today on fiscal 14-15, I'd like to reference some of the exciting work which has taken place over all of 2015. In April of 2015, the International Authority approved MDOT's plan to begin property acquisition in Michigan. And Michigan is responsible for all U.S. property acquisition for the project. And the properties that are necessary for the Michigan side of the project have been refined through a set of marked final right-of-way plans. And to date, MDOT has led a team of consultants, the Michigan Attorney General's Office and the Special Assistant Attorney Generals, in the purchase of a number of properties. Also in Michigan, utility relocations have begun. In May of 2015, the new bridge was officially named the Gordie Howe International Bridge through a joint Canada-Michigan announcement. In July of 2015, WDBA started and actually recently completed the first stage of a two-stage procurement process to select a private sector partner. In October of 2015, we began what is known as the early works activities at the site of at the Canadian Port of Entry. And the early works includes the construction of a 4-kilometer access road, utility relocation, and the placement of significant quantities of fill to stabilize the ground where the plaza is going to be located. And completion of these early works is required to prepare the site for the work to be undertaken by the private sector partner. The early works project has dramatically changed the landscape and is the first visible sign of the start of construction of the Gordie Howe International Bridge project. And looking forward, WDBA will continue to work in close coordination with our partners and our stakeholders. We will continue to utility, relocation, and property acquisition on the U.S. side of the project, and we'll continue with the early work activities on the Canadian side. And we will conclude the P3 procurement process. Ladies and gentlemen, the Gordie Howe International Bridge project is in fact making history. These are exciting times for WDBA, and indeed, I believe this is an exciting time for the region. I'm proud to be part of what has been referred in the past at a past Canadian Senate committee as our beautiful project. And I'm pleased that the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority is well positioned and prepared for the tasks that lie ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cotillo. Right now, we'll proceed with asking some of the questions that we received in advance and the ones we've received so far today. If you continue to have questions, I please ask that you hold them up, and a WDBA staff person will come and collect them and hand them to me. Also, for those of you who have written questions, following the response that will be given to your question by the President, CEO, or Chair, there will be an opportunity for the person who posed the question to ask for clarification. So I'll be reading the name off the card. Okay, so to get started, the first question received: what is the position of the WDBA on preserving Ojibwe shores on the Detroit River as permanent green space, as partial compensation for the environmental sacrifices needed to construct the Right Honorable Herb Gray Parkway, the Bridge Plaza, and the operation of the bridge itself?
Thank you, Heather, for the question. We take the environment very seriously. On our particular site, we have a number of studies that we've undertaken to actually look at species at risk, both plant and, if you will, animal. And we've relocated a number of plants, species at risk, to other host areas. To date, we've relocated more than 100,000 plants. So we continue to work with our stakeholders in identifying issues and trying to resolve those issues. But clearly, we've undertaken that process, and have moved all of the plants that we could move from our site to other areas, recognizing the unique aspect of the area.
And that question was asked by Tom Henderson. Mr. Henderson, do you have a follow-up question to that?
No, I just wondered about the feasibility of perhaps the Ojibwe Shores property being turned over as partial compensation for the environmental problems that the bridge construction created. I know that Burr Great Parkway people, the Windsor-Essex Mobility Group, were just stellar in their compensation package. They in the early days cemented over 5 hectares of provincially significant wetland, and they promised that they would compensate on a 3-to-1 ratio. In fact, when all was said and done, they compensated on a 9-to-1 ratio, and over 114 acres have been preserved as a result of their efforts, and we thank them greatly. And we're hoping that perhaps the bridge people would be equally as environmentally conscious as the Windsor-Essex Mobility Group. Thank you.
And sir, I'll just repeat the question asked for the sake of the people who are watching this via webcast. So basically, can Ojibwe Shores be turned over publicly as compensation for the project impacts?
So maybe I'll take a stab at that, because I was a little bit involved in the Parkway as well. We've gone through complete environmental assessments. I think you're well familiar with that. There was an opportunity along the Parkway, given just the amount of land that it affected and running essentially a 6-lane highway through a developed urban area, the opportunity to do a lot. I can assure you that the board here takes these considerations very seriously. Part of the RFP will be the site, which is all part of the environment. In terms of how we mitigate the impacts, there's a lot of things going on already. You see, as Mike talked about, the 100,000 plants and so on that have been moved. There is in the crossing agreement undertakings with respect to community benefit. So there are a number of safeguards in place. The project is somewhat different than the Parkway was. Frankly, again, just my casual observation, we had a lot of room to move in terms of the kinds of issues you raise, which are very valid issues. My hope, you know, I fished on the Mill Street dock when I was a kid. My hope is that there will be a dramatic improvement in the environment. What specific forms that takes, both the request for proposal process as well as the ongoing work of the WDBA and the Government of Canada. I believe at the end of the day we will have the opportunity to work with the community to ensure that we get the maximum benefit from the environment perspective from this project. And that goes right back to the original DRIC agreements, those kinds of undertakings. And there will be more opportunity for this kind of discussion more in depth. And to our friends on the American side, the same applies. And we have worked, we will work with the local communities, the governor of the state, local municipalities, local representatives to address those kinds of issues.
Thank you.
Hey, our second question.
Heather, sorry, perhaps maybe I can just add a couple of more things. Through the RFQ and the RFP process, we clearly are dealing with, for instance, stormwater management ponds, what we're doing with stormwater that's coming off of the plaza. We're dealing with the Broadway drain and fish habitat, rehabilitation of that. We're also dealing with plantings around the plaza itself. So not only have we dealt with what's there and moved those species that needed to be moved, but also we're replacing more than what we've moved out, but we're also dealing with it on a proactive basis, on a go-forward basis. And again, as Mr. Duncan has mentioned, is not only on the Canadian side, but also on the US side, similarly looking at what we're doing with stormwater management ponds and what we're doing with water that's coming off of the bridge, for instance, how that's being treated before that is put back into the Detroit River.
Second question, when do you plan to release the RFP documents? Days, a month, more than 4 weeks, more than 6 weeks?
Yes, we do plan to release the RFP. We're working as expeditiously as we can on that, but doing things prudently at the same time. So we did announce that we had started our procurement process, as I mentioned earlier, with our RFQ, and we did announce a short list a few weeks ago. So we are continuing to work on the RFP, and it will be out soon.
And that question was asked by William Baker. Mr. Baker, do you have a follow-up question?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, third question. With 2017 to see construction beginning, when can communities and local businesses anticipate public information meetings about construction and post-construction traffic patterns and other plans to mitigate construction period impacts? Small and larger businesses need to be able to plan to minimize the effects of their businesses.
Thank you, Heather. We take this project and the impact this project is going to have on the region very, very seriously. We look at the economic benefits that the project are going to bring, but also the impact that the project is going to have during the construction period, during the operating period. So we have already engaged in discussions with the local community and the regional community. We have put in place aspects in the RFP that speak to how we're actually going to minimize the impact on traffic. We do see that traffic operation and traffic disruption can be a big issue, specifically when we're tying into I-75, when we're coming through other parts of the community, and then the construction traffic, et cetera, that go along with that. So we're going to great lengths to actually minimize, try to minimize the impact of traffic operations during the construction period as well as afterwards. And part of what the chair had mentioned was dealing with this through community benefits so that we actually understand and we recognize the impacts that this could have, and we're trying to mitigate those on a go-forward basis. And then once we're in operation, we'll ensure that our operator is in constant contact with the people surrounding the project to ensure that we do not have continued detrimental effects.
That question was asked by Simone Sagovic. Do you have a follow-up question?
I'm just wondering if in year 2016, even prior to the concessionaire being hired, if some of those discussions with communities about the impacts could begin rather than, because it's really a timing issue. On the U.S. side, when the Gateway project happened, businesses were kind of blindsided by this, and some lost 50% of their business. And, residents have to make plans as well for those impacts, and so just, hoping that the conversations will begin sooner than in our past project experiences.
Okay. So just to repeat.
I think that's good advice.
Yep.
And we'll follow up to discuss that further. But I think it's very good advice.
Great, thank you. Next question. Once the bridge is open, it will provide faster and more reliable cross-border access. Can you comment on what kinds of economic opportunities will be created by this improved access, especially here in Windsor-Essex region?
This is, folks, this is the biggest thing that's going to happen in this area. This is going to bring tremendous benefit to the area. And people look at this as a bridge. It's not just a bridge. It's not just two big customs facilities. It's not just a major project connecting into I-75, but it's part of a broader transportation network. So not only is it's going to improve crossing at the border, but it's also going to take away some of the issues of crossing, both time, the reduced travel time, improved trip time repeatability. So how long it takes to cross so that you're there's greater certainty around that. It also takes off the table the issue of, if I'm going to locate in an area, what does the border mean to that? The other thing I think it also does is it takes off the table if someone is having issues that are with jobs that are currently in the area to say crossing the border is an issue. I think it takes that away, along with the other economic benefits that are going to come, and the economic benefits that come not only with the construction job, and that's what people concentrate on, the number of jobs that are going to be made available during the construction period. It's not just that, but also during the operating period. There would be a fair number of jobs that are going to be created in customs officers in actually operating and maintaining the crossing, and in generally making the crossing function that much more efficient. The other aspect of this, recognizing one of the main purposes of the project is improved travel times, security of the crossing, redundancy of the crossing, and what that means to the broader community, not just in the immediate area, but also much further afield from a trade perspective. So I see all sorts of benefits that are going to accrue because of the project.
If I can just add to that, you know, from a public policy perspective, going back to the original DRIC studies, I mean, keep in mind we've now had 3 prime ministers of Canada, 2 presidents of the United States, 3 governors of Michigan, 3 premiers of Ontario, all of different political stripes, all of whom have agreed on the significance of this project to our, not just our local economies, but to our broader economies. The Cross-Border Institute at the University of Windsor is doing some exciting work about the opportunities for this community. My hope is that Delray, Michigan will see benefit from this project, whether that's in transportation logistics or other types of initiatives. I believe there's going to be a lot of opportunity. What's one of the reasons why the Harper government moved as quickly as they did on implementation, begin building this thing, as they saw the economic benefit. The new government remains committed to that. You know, we've lived through some very difficult years here. Our unemployment rate is still the highest in the country. We've seen our sister city across the river and the region surrounding it go through some very difficult times. Thankfully, we're seeing some progress on both sides of the border. We're going to have to make sure as communities that we seize this opportunity. Whether it's to make our production plants more efficient in terms of getting their goods across the border so they can compete better against Mexico and other places for new work and future work. That's all a part of it. And I can tell you the largest employers in our area, private employers on both sides of the border, have been among the strongest advocates of moving this project forward because of the job and investment opportunities and the ability to not only hopefully attract new investment, but to protect existing investment. And so I think there's a huge opportunity. I applaud the University of Windsor for what they're doing. I hope we'll see similar work on the US side of the border. But this has enormous importance to a more productive economy, which means more jobs and more opportunity, both locally and indeed this project is of certainly provincial and national significance in terms of those considerations.
And that question was asked by Bill Anderson. Dr. Anderson, do you have a follow-up question? Okay, so the next question. The bridge will be a part of the Windsor and Detroit communities for a long time. If our other bridge is used as an example, then at least 100-year life would be reasonable. Given that this bridge will be a fixture of our communities for generations, what public input will be sought in terms of visual elements, incorporation of local history, and other modes of crossing besides motorized vehicles, such as bicycles? How will this be translated into requirements for the bridge?
Let me try that. First of all, on the design of the bridge itself, the question was how long perhaps is the design for. We're actually designing the bridge and the major bridge elements to have a 125-year life. So Heather, you're absolutely right. Something of this significance is going to be here for a very, very long time. So what have we done to, in fact, protect the aesthetic, if you will, of this project? So part of this was recognized quite some time ago. As part of our RFP, we have developed a very extensive aesthetic guide that we're going to be providing to the bidders so they can come back to us with the designs that they're coming forward with. Through the request for qualifications that we used to shortlist the 6 proponents, the very large teams down to 3 that we're going to invite to the RFP stage, we wanted to ensure that they had experience in dealing with these large signature type projects. And so we're bringing that all forward. So we have taken that very, very seriously because it is an integral part of the community. And if you look at these major bridges, they can be beautiful, they are beautiful, but how does it fit into the balance of the landscape and of the community?
That question was asked by Jeff Sabokin. Do you have a follow-up?
Just follow up to that, I was wondering about, I know people like the idea of having bike lanes in this community, and since it's going to be around for that period of time, will that either be put in the proposal, or will there be an investigation as to how much more that would cost or would be involved? How would that?
So I can tell you that the possibility of bike lanes is being put into the RFP. So the bidders will be able to provide recommendations on that. In the interest of being completely candid, a lot of the decisions that would be associated with putting bike lanes on the bridge, I mean, I'm quite intrigued by it. We built 20 kilometers of bike lanes on the Parkway. I mean, the thought of being able to ride your bike across the river to Delray has some appeal. From our perspective, a lot of that will rest with the governments on both sides of the border, who have responsibility for safety, customs, all of those kinds of things. Those are beyond our mandate, but we have put into the RFP the ability for the proponents to build that into their proposals. And if they do that, and I would urge you to be in touch with your local federal representatives on both sides of the border, eventually there would have to be decisions taken by governments on both sides of the border with respect to customs, immigration, all of those kinds of things. I don't believe they're insurmountable, but to answer your question specifically, yes, we are giving the proponents the opportunity to provide us with how you could do that, but then ultimately we're going to have to lobby both governments on either side of the border to accommodate customs and immigration requirements that they would have that are beyond the jurisdiction of the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority. Is that fair to say, Mike? It's
fair to say that, as well as the chair has mentioned, there are safety issues, customs issues. I think those are things we can overcome, but we also want to ensure that bike lanes are put in. What do they connect to? How can they best fit into existing and future pathways? Again, we're building something for an awful long time in the future, so we want to make sure that we have the flexibility to do exactly what you're saying. But then how do we tie that into everything else? To have a bike path or a bike lane just on the bridge, but not going into anything else, we want our private sector concessionaire to be thinking from a system perspective and how that ties in to both existing and planned bike paths. Okay?
Thank you. What is the order or sequence of construction on the U.S. side? I-75 ramps and service drives, port of entry, bridge.
Wow, great question. Hopefully it was an engineer that asked that question or a planner. Suffice to say that we do have a staging plan as to what we see that a potential constructor can actually build. We're trying to tie that into some existing or some planned reconstruction, for instance, of I-75, so that, to earlier question, that we minimize the traffic impact to the community and to the traveling public. I think by its very nature, you're building a very large bridge. The bridge construction itself will take anywhere from 48 to 52 months. That's our estimate right now, but it depends on what the concessionaire comes forward with. So we're going to see the construction of the main bridge as being something that is done first, and then I think, again, by its nature, you're going to have many other activities occurring at the same time. So that's about the best answer I can give you, short of when we get a proposal back, it will be, they will come back with a schedule as to the actual sequencing, and then it'll be up to us collectively to communicate that back to the community so that there are no surprises around when roads are closed or when detours are put in place, things of that nature. But principally, just to reinforce, on the I-75, Michigan DOT is already looking at some rehabilitation work, and so we're tying that in so we do minimize, our plan is to minimize as much as possible the disruption to the traveling public. And we're going to use other techniques so that when our concessionaire goes and, for instance, closes a lane down, we have incentives or penalties that the longer they keep it closed, the more penalties they're going to pay. Again, all designed to, if you're going to disrupt once, disrupt quickly, and move on.
Okay. And that question was asked by Greg Ward. Mr. Ward, any follow-ups? No? Okay, next question. From a maritime security perspective, will the two facilities on the U.S. side, one a stone dock, the other a concrete silo, continue to operate once the new bridge is built between the two operations? I ask this because on the Canadian side, I have been advised that no ships would be able to dock and unload at, near, or under the bridge.
So for everyone else's sake, the bridge piers on the Canadian side is going to land on the site of an existing aggregate transshipment point. So aggregates come in from northern Michigan, Manitoulin Island, elsewhere, are offloaded there, and then they're shipped out by truck. On the U.S. side, the main pier is landing on the Lafarge property, and that's where they have a large cement silo. The cement is manufactured in the northern part of Michigan, is brought down there, and again, it's a transshipment point. We see that the way that the bridge is being configured, that the operations at Lafarge will remain. We're making some adjustments, but the operation for the most part will remain as you see it. On the Canadian side, the bridge is going to basically take all of the operations that are currently there, the aggregate transshipment, so we will not have aggregate transshipment at that particular point. And then from a security perspective of just having ships, it cannot physically unload on the Canadian side in the property that's there. But on the U.S. side, we very much see, and Lafarge very much sees, that they will be able to continue operating. And that's another opportunity for us, that we've worked with the affected individuals to make changes, if you will, to try to minimize the impact both to them and to us.
Thank you. That question was asked by Thomas Vita. Mr. Vita, do you have a follow-up question?
No, it's more of a comment. It was because I work for a company that's losing the aggregate dock on the side of the border, so the staff and the employees there look across the river. They've seen early renderings of the project, seeing those two facilities still there, and they're basically asking us, once that facility is closed and the impacts and jobs, they're still going to be able to unload ships and do that sort of idea. I'm not part of the sales of the land. I am the marine security manager for the company, so I just wanted to get that feeling of ships would be able to be on our side, why would they be able to be on that side under the bridge from that point of view. That's kind of where it's coming from. Very early, they're looking at artist renderings and that. I'm just trying to reduce some of the concerns.
Yeah, and part of that is, so Transport Canada is involved in the acquisition of the properties on the Canadian side and are in active discussions on a number of properties. And I think part of the issue is on the Lafarge property, we're just taking a sliver of it where the pier is going in. That's not quite the same situation on the Canadian side.
I assume there'll be, with the size of the property we're talking about here, a lot of the staging of the equipment and that will be there as well. So even if there ever was an opportunity to use that for stone, maybe so far down the road that wouldn't be feasible.
And you're bringing a very good point forward that not only do you need the land or the property to actually put the bridge and associated buildings and plaza, but then the constructor will also require laydown areas, staging areas, construction areas that are outside of that particular footprint. We're just acquiring the footprint that was necessary for the project, and then the concessionaire will come along and make other arrangements for additional properties that he or she may require.
Thank you. The next card has a combination of comments and questions. One comment is they'd like to see the closure of Matchett Road to LaSalle to become a dedicated cycle commuter corridor between downtown Windsor through LaSalle with access to the Herb Gray Parkway with an eventual link through the county. They'd like to see formation of an Ojibwe Urban National Environmental Refuge that will inform, educate, and inspire. And this would be to link all green areas to river and protect the animal, endangered, and threatened prairie lands, flora, and fauna. They've asked what plan is in place to prevent trucks from continuing through Huron's Church to the Ambassador Bridge. Would there be environmental fines? Actually, maybe I'll stop and let you answer that and then go on.
Let me try the first two, because if I heard correctly, talking about extensions of perhaps other bike lanes, what to do around prairie land preservation, closing of a municipal road. And some things are, some issues like the closing of a municipal road, that's more of a, it's quite outside of our project area. But I do see that the bicycle lanes and perhaps prairie land issues is a perfect opportunity for us to continue to work with the municipality, with affected stakeholders, to see how this can be looked at from a more holistic perspective and to see what can be done. The issue around Huron Church Road and, if you will, if I heard correctly, banning or restricting commercial vehicles.
Yeah, to prevent trucks from continuing through Huron Church to the Ambassador Bridge.
Our best weapon that we have for that is we're going to provide a super efficient crossing of the border so that the trucks will have a natural tendency to use our bridge. And that's the best way of getting trucks off Huron Church, in my humble opinion.
There's been a suggestion for massive tree planting to offset fossil fuel emissions, recognizing Marathon Fuels and the increase of emissions there. Will charging stations for e-cars be included at the plaza? And has national defense been engaged to date? Is that the question? Yeah. Well, there's a few more, but I'll stop there.
So a couple of things. We're very cognizant of how technology is moving. We want to ensure that we're not building something that prohibits some of these advanced technologies. All we know is that what we know today is going to be quite dated in 5 years' time. So we wanted as much as possible to construct a bridge and a crossing that is permissive as we can be, both with known technologies and technologies later on. And what I mean by that is we're also looking at things like autonomous vehicles, how they can we handle those at some later time? How can we deal with some of the government's broader public policy initiatives around greenhouse gas emissions and reductions? How can we deal better with environmental issues? So we're very much being proactive and permissive in our request for proposals to the private sector to allow their creativity to come forward. And I'm sorry, the last one now is also the defense one.
National defense.
The national defense. So recognize again that one of the principal objectives of the crossing is safety, redundancy, et cetera, et cetera. So we very much have looked at the security aspects around each of the elements of the project on the Canadian side and the US side from a security, a threat perspective, and ensuring that, that we take appropriate measures to deal with that. So national defense per se, various security institutions, whether they're first responders, whether they're at the national, the state level, or the provincial level, they have all been engaged in this.
This is a comment. I'd like to see Ojibwe shores protected and a link to all green spaces. This would be to create an Ojibwe Urban National Environmental Refuge. I'd like to see First Nations honored, to see healing plants planted, perhaps homeless could do rehab work in greenhouses, and I'd like to see lands, replace taken lands for the bridge. In addition, another question, could you build the bridge foundations to accommodate the peregrine falcons? Access nest sites from the bridge instead of from the ambassador location. So it's a suggestion. And the last question, the largest fueling station on the Great Lakes is located in Sandwich, along with the Under River Pipeline. What environmental disaster protocols are in place to prevent a national environmental downriver disaster should these two sites fail? So I think we've discussed protection related to Ojibwe shores in that. And so is there, are there emergency protocols in place for environmental disasters?
Can I deal with an earlier question first? The earlier question was how we're dealing with First Nation, Aboriginal people. We have consulted extensively with First Nations and Aboriginal, and we've involved them significantly in species at risk and relocation of species at risk. We very much, through our request for qualifications, wanted to ensure that the firms that we're shortlisting into the request for proposal stage had significant involvement and experience in dealing with First Nation and Aboriginal issues, tied in with environment, jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So those, I believe, we're doing a very good job there, and we will continue to insist on that on a go-forward basis. The other question was what protocols are in place for fuel spills, et cetera. I'm going to suggest that that ought to be, I'm confident that those types of protocols are already in place, but by the operators of those facilities themselves. For everyone in the room, those are basically upstream from the project site. So we have not, I have no direct knowledge of whether that is in fact in place. But the other important thing from our perspective is, and one of the I think the beautiful aspects of the bridge is that the piers are not in the water. The piers are actually on land, so we're not actually touching anything in the water. So if that helps.
Okay, that was asked by Kathy Greenwell. Ms. Greenwell, do you have a follow-up question?
Just in concern of the green spaces, we don't have enough carbon sinks to offset. We have the worst air quality in Canada. So we really need to look at offsetting this fossil fuel emissions that we're dealing with. Part of the reason we're seeing the new bridge is because here in Church Corridor, if we're seeing 8,000 trucks a day, that's a lot of fossil fuels for the local people. We don't have the trees along it to offset the fuels, and it's not cleaning the air. So my concern in all of this is to see Ojibwe once and for all, the shores protected, never taken over, that because the animals, they're stuck. They're stuck between roads. We don't have a green linkage right to the river. I would like to see it nationally protected forever so it can never be taken over, because if this brings in the development that you're looking for, we have to protect our green spaces. We have nothing to offset the fossil fuels, and we're stuck breathing this. We're sick. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Chairman, you sounded sincere in discussing how this project is a source of pride. I admire your commitment. However, this all can change if the host neighborhood on the other side of Bridge, Delray, is not taken seriously. The challenges and mitigations needed are beyond what is stated in the FEIS, or the Federal Environmental Impact Statement. You can see it right away when you cross the current bridge. WDBA's role is critical because you have the power to decide how the families are treated. The dismissal of that power because we aren't Canadians is misdirected. What is WDBA's plan to ensure it is not the reason for the destruction of a historic poor neighborhood in Detroit? I want you to keep thinking of this project as a source of pride. Canada has the ability to show the world that development can be done right. How? It's up to WDBA.
So, first of all, we will be doing meetings like this on the other side of the border. This is the first one, so we will be coming across. There are ongoing discussions between the Government of Canada, the State of Michigan. We are governed, of course, by the crossing agreement that the Government of Canada and the State of Michigan discussed. The board toured this side of the border today. Next time we're going to tour the U.S. side of the border so that they can have, you know, a very clear understanding of what we're looking at. You know, I pointed out to them that Sandwich Town has a long and rich history, including being a disembarkation point for the Underground Railway, as well as a very long history dating back, you know, to the founding of Detroit by Cadillac. Craig, who's on, I didn't realize till today, Craig went to the University of Windsor and is very familiar with the Dominion House Tavern, so has an understanding of at least one historical site. But to our American friends, yes, we are extremely anxious to work with you, to hear the concerns of the community, through the community benefit agreement that has been reached between Canada and the state of Michigan, to ensure that there is an overall positive impact on the citizens of Delray, on the economy of that particular part of Southeast Michigan, and to ensure that all of our citizens on both sides of the border enjoy maximum benefits. We will have a lot to learn as we go forward, as will the proponents. I was pleased, by the way, with the three shortlisted teams have both Canadian and U.S. Organizations involved in the process. Again, just in the time I've been involved with the file, we've dealt now with the first president who's actually involved, actually signed the original DRIC Accords was George W. Bush. The Obama administration, obviously we're going to have a new United States president prior to this thing being completed. We started on the Michigan side with Governor Engler, then there was Governor Granholm, now Governor Snyder. I believe there's another state election coming up on the Canadian side, similar story with differing political parties. But all I can do today is to tell you the work that's gone on at the staff level, between the governments, and the commitment of this board to work with the communities on the other side of the border, because we're very much partners in this, and learning and having a better understanding of the community on the other side of the border is a top priority for all of us.
Okay. That question was asked by Rashida Tlaib. Ms. Tlaib, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, just a comment is that you all have a tremendous amount of leverage. And the one thing that won't change is our governor's going to change, the president of the United States is going to change, local elected officials will change on the other side, is the concessionaire, the person that will win this bid, they will not change. And so that's where you all have the power and leverage to make sure that, and let me tell you, every question here is phenomenal, and I love the big idea. I wish we could ask about bikes in Detroit. We can't, because when you go to the other side, you'll see why we can't even ask for bikes or bike paths right now. We're worried about air quality and housing and so forth. Just know that you all, this could be, and I know I sound horny sometimes, but it could be a legacy of the WDBA if you can do this right and do it beautifully. You can really show, again, the world, you know, just how it's supposed to be. Thank you.
So perhaps I didn't communicate as effectively as I should have on the bike. Just I want to touch on the bike path. We are going to make it permissive. We want that to happen in our RFP. We have to deal with some technical issues, but I want to ensure that when submissions come back, that they look at a system perspective. So again, I mentioned tying into existing, future, because sometimes if you don't plan for it, then you basically shut the door on it. The other aspect around is community benefits, and it ties into the earlier question around air quality, diesel emission, the use of innovative technology, and maybe it's not so innovative, like solar panels, geothermal energy, just to try to reduce the carbon footprint. And we're encouraging our concessionaire, when they come forward with proposals on this, is how to deal with reduced energy and alternative means of generating electricity, of actually keeping our carbon footprint down, and encouraging them to enter partnerships with other people so that we can plant more trees, we can get more green areas. So we very much are looking to do that.
Next question. At the first meeting of WDBA, I discussed with WDBA staff that drawings and site plans indicated that the Canadian Plaza site is landlocked and may reduce or restrict any required expansion. Do you see this as a possible problem? And if so, how would you deal with such a problem?
Room for growth over the life of the project.
I think the Canadian site at 132 acres is going to be one of the largest sites, border crossing sites. So from a customs facility and function, I think we have more than enough room. We are somewhat constrained by Brighton Beach power on the riverside, NEMAC on the north side, if you will. So there are some natural constraints, but I think we have a very efficient traffic pattern within the plaza itself to deal both with known needs and future needs. But this is a bit of a balance because we have to ensure that we have enough land, but that we don't go out and get much more land than what we need. So we're making an efficient use of the land that we have.
That question was asked by Jim Broderick. Mr. Broderick, do you have a follow-up question? Okay, next question. To what extent is there flexibility in the design in closing down existing overpasses in Detroit? Was this included in the RFP? For example, the current design proposes closing down an I-75 overpass, connecting a health clinic to the community and the Junction overpass. And a second question is, to what extent will the Canadian government support and help create buffers between the project and surrounding community outside of the project footprint in the U.S.?
I think the question is centered. There are a number of pedestrian bridges that cross over I-75, so we are looking at replacing a number of those with new structures themselves. As far as a buffer, this is a buffer not only on the U.S. side but also on the Canadian side. So we're looking at sound walls, we're looking at berming, we're looking at landscaping, we're looking at green areas to try to minimize the impact of living beside, if you will, a customs facility. So we very much are looking at that. We have some mandatory aspects that the concessionaire is going to have to bid on, but we're also encouraging them to look beyond the mandated requirement to something more than that, and that's where they can be creative in working with other organizations in partnership with them to deal with tree planting, grass areas, and perhaps putting up other aspects which I'm not thinking of, but others perhaps will.
That question was asked by Raquel Castaneda Lopez. Councilwoman, do you have a follow-up question?
Sure. Just for clarity in relation to the overpass issue, this is not a pedestrian overpass. It's actually vehicle traffic goes back and forth, and that's one of the biggest concerns is that the overpass will remain or become open only to accessible to pedestrians, and so that's very concerning given that it's used by the community. So part of the issue in the city of Detroit is that although the plaza is going to be to the south of I-75,
what I can commit is that we'll look at that with our MDOT partners and answer that. I just don't know the specific details around that.
And in relation to the buffer space, unfortunately in the U.S. we don't necessarily always have the most progressive laws, so we don't necessarily have on the books laws related to having more buffer space. And so what we've been told so far is that the Canadian government is kind of going to comply with the U.S. government, but we really want to push the Canadian government and the U.S. government to be more creative and progressive about that, because as it looks right now is that the plaza and expansion of the service right and such essentially will abut residential areas, and there'll be very minimal buffer space. So we want to make sure, given that there's school, there's a high concentration of families and children in that area, that there are required buffers beyond what I guess is the minimal in the mandate. So I appreciate hearing that that's in the RFP, and look forward to seeing what the concessionaires do.
Yeah, and part of this is I think I want to separate being beside, for instance, a residential area, and that is the property is beside it, as opposed to how far away the actual trucks are, if you will, or the parking areas, or the working areas. And so there is significant buffer there, but again, we can take that offline and show you our plans around that and see how they can in fact be improved beyond what we've stipulated.
And Councillor, if I may, I'll undertake to come over and have you show me those specifically, just so that I can really see it and not visualize it.
So next card. Will there be significant opportunities for public art or an open competition? And will there be public access under portions of the bridge to allow for a Great Lake Trail?
We have looked at public arts, and that is in part of our aesthetic guide that we are proposing to that we're mandating to our concessionaire. As far as the pedestrian path underneath the bridge, frankly, there are some security concerns around that. So we have not, I'm not sure that this has been raised in the past, but clearly we can look at that, but we have to balance that aspect with, for instance, if we're talking on the U.S. side, underneath the bridge is basically trespassing onto Lafarge property. And then there are some security issues around being underneath the bridge. So I just wanted to point that out because we have a number of challenges when we want to try to do something, then we have to weigh that off with the other aspects that come with it.
That question was asked by David Hanna. Mr. Hanna, do you have a follow-up question?
Well, just that there is a movement for Lake Ontario Trail, a Lake Erie Trail, and we're right in the middle of the Great Lakes, and it would be very important to see whatever we can do the best we can. Consider long-range possibilities, because some adjacent industries may not be there in the future, and just like Windsor has railways on our riverfront, something could change in the future. We have to present an opportunity that we don't want to stifle now without looking into that.
Yeah, and I think what I said earlier is we're trying to do as much as possible. We're trying to make sure that we don't prevent something from occurring in the future, so that perhaps looking at how bicycle lanes and pathways currently planned or future, that are planned into the future, how those could work together. And then as the future evolves, then we still have opportunities to make some changes. But right now, I'm not aware of any of those riverfront properties becoming available for that. But that's not to say that it can't tie in with existing nature trails, bike paths, walkways.
Our final question is a repeat of actually our first question. Will there be walkways for pedestrians on the crossing, which we've already answered. That question was asked by Tony Mosna. Mr. Mosna, do you have a follow-up question?
No, I think you covered it. I was actually thinking about walking across the bridge rather than underneath
Right.
bicycles.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that was our final question. So, oh, or did we have one? No? Okay, thank you. No, I'm not going to. So this concludes the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority's annual public meeting covering the 2014-2015 fiscal year. WDBA is committed to keeping our stakeholders and the public informed. We will be posting all of the materials from today's meeting, including the questions and answers, on our website over the next couple days. We also invite all of you to join our email list, and this is to receive updates about the WDBA and the Gordie Howe International Bridge. You can join that email list by going to our website and clicking Join Email List. On behalf of the WDBA, I thank you for your interest. And for those of us who've joined us via webcast, please note that that webcast will now be ending. And for those of you attending in person, I'd like to invite you to join WDBA board and staff members for some refreshments at the back of the room. Thank you.